By the time Aisha Monroe learned that a marriage could be weaponized, she had already mastered every other form of damage control. What she didn't yet understand, what no one ever teaches you, is that the most dangerous crisis is the one happening in your own home, quietly, while you're busy winning everywhere else. On the 37th floor of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan, Asha stood barefoot at the window, phone pressed to her ear, closing a seven-figure contract before sunrise. The city below her was still half asleep, streets pale and wet with early light, but her voice was sharp, calm, precise. The voice of a woman people trusted when everything was about to collapse. "Control the narrative," she said softly. "Don't apologize for what you didn't break. We'll lead, not react." She ended the call, exhaled, and allowed herself one small smile. Another crisis solved. Another brand saved. Another proof that she belonged in rooms that hadn't been built with women like her in mind. If you've ever admired women who seem to have it all together, who walk into chaos and bend it to their will, this is where you might want to pause, take a breath, and stay with this story. And if something in it resonates, if you recognize the quiet strength or the hidden cost behind it, feel free to like, comment, or follow along. Some stories aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to be witnessed. Asha Monroe was 34, Black, American, and the founder of Monroe and Mercury, one of Chicago's most discreet and powerful crisis PR firms. She didn't sell publicity. She sold silence, survival, reputational resurrection. CEOs, politicians, hedge fund heirs, they came to her when the world was about to turn on them, when a single headline could undo decades of carefully constructed legitimacy. She was brilliant at it, surgical, relentlessly composed. Her wardrobe reflected that precision. Clean lines, architectural tailoring, neutral colors sharp enough to cut glass. Her presence did the same. People listened when she spoke. Men who underestimated her learned quickly and quietly. And then there was her husband. Graham Caldwell was everything old money Chicago admired in a man. White, American, educated at the right schools, partner track at an elite investment firm whose offices smelled like leather, ambition, and inherited confidence. His family name opened doors before he ever had to knock. Boards, donors, judges. Caldwell was a surname that carried weight. Together, they were considered impeccable. Invited to every gala, featured in the right charity newsletters. Asha, the brilliant strategist. Graham, the financier with legacy in his blood. A modern power couple, proof that love and ambition could coexist beautifully. At least, that was the brand. Their penthouse was immaculate, curated the way everything in Aisha's life was. Floor-to-ceiling windows, art chosen with intention, not sentiment. 2 home offices on opposite sides of the apartment. 2 lives that ran parallel with impressive efficiency. They hadn't touched each other in months. Not in the way that mattered. Asha told herself it was normal. Successful marriages didn't look like movies. They looked like schedules and mutual respect and separate calendars. Graham worked insane hours. She did too. Intimacy could wait. Love didn't need constant reassurance. Still, some mornings she woke before him and watched his reflection in the dark glass, wondering when exactly they'd stopped meeting in the middle. That morning, Graham was already gone. A text waited on her phone. "Early meeting. Don't wait up. You were incredible at the gala last night." She stared at the message longer than necessary. Compliments had replaced conversations lately. Praise instead of presence. Across the city, Asha Monroe was known as the woman who could read patterns before they fully formed, who could spot the fracture lines beneath polished surfaces. But at home, she told herself she was imagining things. That doubt was indulgent. That trust was strength. She dressed carefully for the day ahead, slipping into a tailored charcoal suit, fastening earrings she'd bought for herself after her first major acquisition win. In the mirror, she looked exactly like the woman people admired, controlled, radiant, untouchable. What no one saw was the quiet unease settling in her chest. the sense that something fundamental was shifting beneath her feet. Perfection, after all, is a brand. And brands, Asha knew this better than anyone, can be built to hide rot just as easily as they can be built to inspire belief. As she stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, Asha had no idea that the life she'd spent years constructing was already being audited behind her back. What she did know, with a clarity she would later recognize as instinct, was this. When the truth finally arrived, it would not knock politely. It would shatter glass. If marriage was the public face of Asha Monroe's life, then friendship was the private one, the place where the armor came off, where brilliance softened into something human. And for 12 years, that place had been occupied by one person. Sienna Park knew Asha before the penthouse, before the awards, before men learned to lower their voices when she spoke. They'd met in graduate school, two women navigating institutions that had never been designed with their comfort in mind. Late nights, borrowed confidence, shared ambitions spoken out loud like prayers. Sienna had been there when Asha cried over her first failed pitch, when her mother's health declined, when Chicago felt too cold and too sharp and too white all at once. Sienna had called her my constant. Asha had believed her. Now, on a bright Thursday afternoon, they sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant in River North, the kind with low lighting and menus that changed weekly. Asha had chosen it without thinking. Neutral territory, safe, familiar. Sienna arrived 10 minutes early, already halfway through a glass of wine. "You look tired," Sienna said, smiling too quickly. "Still saving the world?" Asha returned the smile, slower. "Someone has to." They laughed, but something beneath it felt brittle, like glass tapped too often. Sienna's energy was sharper than usual, her gestures restless. She checked her phone twice before Asha had even taken off her coat. There was a time when Asha would have noticed immediately. There was a time when she noticed everything. "I wanted to tell you in person," Sienna said finally, leaning forward, fingers circling the stem of her glass. "I've been offered a position, senior curator, Los Angeles." The words landed with more force than Asha expected. Los Angeles. Distance. An ending disguised as an opportunity. "That's big," Asha said carefully. "Congratulations." Sienna's eyes flickered. Not joy, not relief. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. "It is. Career-defining. Everything I've worked for." She hesitated, then added too quickly, "But it means leaving Chicago. Leaving you. Leaving everything." "You'll come back," Asha said. "We'll visit. Flights exist. Time zones are inconvenient, not fatal." Sienna reached across the table and took her hand, gripping tighter than necessary. "You're my family here. You and—" She stopped herself, swallowed. "You matter to me more than you know." Asha's chest tightened. Why wouldn't I know? For a moment, Sienna looked like she might cry. Instead, she laughed, bright and brittle again. "God, listen to me. I'm being dramatic. I always am." They talked after that, about logistics, about art, about memories they shared so well they'd become shorthand. But the conversation kept snagging on invisible threads. Sienna mentioned Graham more than she ever had before. His work, his taste, his insight, casual observations that felt rehearsed. "He's brilliant, you know," Sienna said at one point, "in a way people don't always see." Asha's fork paused midair. "I see it." "Of course you do," Sienna said softly. Too softly. "I just hope he appreciates you." The sentence lingered, wrong in shape and weight. Appreciation had never been a question Asha asked of her marriage. Respect, yes. Partnership. But appreciation sounded like something owed, something measured. When they hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, Sienna held on longer than usual. Her hands trembled slightly against Asha's back. "Promise me something," she whispered. "No matter what happens, promise we won't ever lie to each other." Asha pulled back just enough to look at her. "Why would you say that?" Sienna smiled, eyes too bright. "Because honesty is all we have." That night, back in the penthouse, Asha stood in the kitchen scrolling through emails while the city darkened outside. Graham was late again. She didn't ask why. She rarely did anymore. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. "You look beautiful today." I don't say it enough. Asha stared at the screen, unsettled by the tenderness of it, by the timing, by the strange sense that something had shifted, quietly, without her permission. Across the apartment, Graham's study door was closed. Light glowed beneath it. Asha told herself she was imagining patterns again. That success made people paranoid. That love, friendship, and ambition could coexist without secrets. Still, as she set her phone down, a thought surfaced. Uninvited, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. Some people don't just know too much. Some people know exactly where to hurt you and choose not to look away. Graham Caldwell had never thought of himself as the villain. Villains were loud, obvious, men who lost control and paid for it. Graham had spent his entire life doing the opposite, controlling every variable, anticipating every risk, ensuring that nothing truly unexpected ever touched him. He believed this was maturity. He believed it was love. From the quiet sanctuary of his study, Graham watched the city through tinted glass. Chicago spread beneath him like a system he understood. Markets rose and fell. Reputations were built, then corrected. People made mistakes. Men like him learned how to monetize them. His desk was immaculate. No clutter, no sentiment, just precision. The kind of order that reassured him he was still in charge. Asha thought the room was about privacy, about focus. That was partly true. But more than anything, it was about containment. In this room, Graham didn't have to be the supportive husband, the admiring partner, the man who smiled politely while donors congratulated his wife before acknowledging him. He loosened his tie and leaned back in his chair, replaying the evening in his head. Another gala, another room where Asha had commanded attention without raising her voice. Men leaned toward her instinctively. Women listened. People trusted her, not because of her name, but because of her competence. That was the part no one ever talked about. Graham had grown up believing power was inherited, protected, inevitable. He had been groomed for it, sent to the right schools, taught how to speak without revealing anything, trained to wait for his turn. His last name opened doors before he had proven himself capable of walking through them. And then he married Asha Monroe. At first, it had felt strategic in the best possible way. She was brilliant, magnetic, a force. Being with her elevated him in ways he hadn't anticipated. People remembered him differently, introduced him with more respect, asked for his opinion instead of assuming it. But somewhere along the line, admiration curdled into something else. Resentment. It started subtly. The way people sought Asha out first. The way her firm became indispensable while his deals blurred together in the background. The way praise clung to her, unshared, unqualified. She didn't need his protection. She didn't even seem to need his approval. Graham told himself that was fine. That modern marriages weren't about hierarchy. That strong women were an asset. But in the quiet moments, in this room, late at night, he felt something colder. The unsettling sense that he was becoming optional in his own life. Asha didn't lean on him. She didn't ask for guidance. She didn't falter in ways that allowed him to feel necessary. And Graham had been raised to believe that necessity was the truest form of love. That was when Sienna began to matter. She listened differently, looked at him with something like awe, asked his opinion, and waited for the answer. She made him feel, he hated the word, but it was accurate, central. It wasn't just sex. Graham dismissed that explanation immediately. Sex was replaceable. Validation was not. Sienna saw him as the architect, the strategist, the man with the plan. Where Asha moved through the world like it was already hers, Sienna seemed grateful just to be invited inside. The plan had taken shape gradually, the way all good plans did. Quiet conversations, hypotheticals, contingencies. Graham opened a drawer and removed a slim folder. He hadn't labeled it dramatically. No betrayal, no escape, just a clean tab. Exit. Inside were documents in various stages of completion. Drafts, timelines, asset reclassifications, narrative frameworks. He didn't think of them as lies. He thought of them as positioning. Asha had built her company on narrative control. It was only fair that he learned from the best. In his version of events, no one was being harmed. Aisha would survive. She always did. She had her firm, her accolades, her resilience. She didn't need him. That was the story he told himself when guilt threatened to surface. What she didn't need, he reasoned, was access. Access to assets, access to leverage, access to a future he could no longer share without feeling diminished by it. Marriage, to Graham, was a contract that had outlived its usefulness. Contracts were meant to be renegotiated or terminated when they stopped serving mutual interests. He closed the folder and slid it back into the drawer. In the hallway beyond his study, the apartment was quiet. Asha was home. He could sense it, the way the space felt different when she was there, charged with her presence even in silence. For a fleeting moment, something like doubt flickered through him. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Sienna. "I can't stop thinking about us, about what comes next." Graham allowed himself a small, private smile. Next was already in motion. Love, he believed, wasn't about honesty, it was about outcome, and he fully intended to win. The envelope arrived on a Monday because betrayals, Asha would later realize, have a cruel sense of scheduling. They don't strike on dramatic days. They choose ordinary ones, the kind you think you'll forget. It was delivered to her office by hand, not through the building's mailroom, not with the usual security scan. Her assistant Nia stepped in without knocking, expression sharpened by instinct. "This came for you," she said, holding it like it might leak. Asha looked up from her screen. The conference call she just finished still hummed in her ears. Apologies traded like currency, reputations stitched back together with her quiet authority. Outside her window, Chicago was a gray blur of rain and glass. The envelope was plain. No logo, no return address, just her name in block letters. Ashammonroe. No Mrs. Caldwell. No flourish, no warmth. Asha's first thought was not fear. It was irritation. People who wanted access to her always assumed they could take it. "Did the courier say who sent it?" she asked. Nia shook her head. "Just said it was important and asked me to make sure you opened it today." Asha's fingers hovered over the paper. The weight of it was wrong. Too light to be documents, too firm to be empty. She turned it over. The seal wasn't wax, wasn't branded, just a strip of tape pressed down with finality. In the pause before she opened it, Asha felt something tighten beneath her ribs. Not panic, not yet. Something quieter. The same sensation she had before a scandal broke in public. When the air shifted and the room stopped being safe. She slid a letter opener beneath the tape and lifted the flap. Inside was a small black flash drive and a folded card, thick and expensive. The kind of paper you feel in your fingertips long after you set it down. She unfolded it. One sentence, typed cleanly, no signature. "You deserve the truth before the Caldwell Gala." Asha didn't move. The Caldwell Gala, the annual charity event Graham's family treated like a coronation. Donors, board members, judges with soft smiles and hard influence. A room full of people who could ruin you without ever raising their voices. The timing was surgical. Nia spoke carefully, like she was approaching a wild animal. "Do you want me to—" "No," Asha said too quickly, then softer. "No, I'm fine." She wasn't fine, but she had built an entire career on making fine sound believable. When Nia left, Asha locked her office door. Not out of fear of intrusion, out of a sudden need to be alone with whatever this was. She held the flash drive between her fingers. It was warm from her palm, as if it already belonged to her, as if it had been waiting. There were 100 possibilities, and Asha's mind, always gifted at crisis math, began calculating them in ruthless sequence. Blackmail, a warning, a competitor's move, a jealous client, a Caldwell family test meant to remind her of her place. The last thought made her jaw tighten. Asha turned her chair toward her laptop and inserted the drive. A folder opened automatically. No elaborate encryption, no tricks, just one file. Asha's eyes fixed on the name. Caldwell Bedroom 0712.mp4. The word bedroom hit her like a slap, not because it implied sex, but because it implied access. Violation. The idea that someone had looked into her private life and recorded it like content. Asha's throat tightened. She removed her hands from the keyboard and pressed her palms to the desk, grounding herself in the cool glass surface. Her mind tried to rationalize. Maybe it was fake. Maybe it was edited. Maybe it was a misunderstanding sharpened into malice. But her instincts, those instincts that had saved other people's empires, did not offer comfort. They offered clarity. Something had already happened. The only question was whether she would look away. She reached for her phone, then stopped. Calling Graham would be like stepping into a trap blindfolded. Calling Sienna would be worse. If the file involved either of them, a warning would give them time to erase, to spin, to reframe. Asha knew that playbook. She had written it for other people. She had sold it as a service. Now she realized with a sick twist of irony, someone had been applying it to her. She moved the cursor to the file. The play icon hovered there like a dare. Her heartbeat was steady, but each pulse felt louder, heavy in her ears. She thought of the gala, thought of the room full of smiling faces, thought of Graham's family, their careful compliments in quiet contempt, thought of Sienna's trembling hands on hers when she'd asked for honesty like it was oxygen. Asha clicked once. Then, before the video even opened, her laptop chimed with an incoming message. A text from Graham. Running late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Asha stared at the words until they blurred slightly at the edges, as if her mind refused to let them settle into meaning. Love you. The lie was so casual, so practiced, like breathing. She didn't reply. She didn't move. She just watched the loading bar creep forward, inch by inch, while her life divided itself neatly into two eras. Before she knew, and after. When the screen finally flickered, Asha leaned in. Because some truths don't knock. They arrive in silence, anonymous and uninvited. And then they take everything they touch and change its name. The video did not begin the way Asha expected. There was no sudden movement, no shocking sound, no immediate violence to the senses. No sex, at least not at first. Just a room she recognized so intimately it made her stomach drop. Her bedroom. Not a generic space. Not something that could be mistaken for anywhere else. This was her bed, custom upholstered, chosen after weeks of deliberation. Her art on the walls. The chair by the window where she sometimes sat at night, scrolling through reports while Graham slept beside her. Late afternoon light slanted through the glass exactly as it did every day at that hour. The camera angle was wrong. Too high, too deliberate, hidden near the ceiling, angled downward with intention. Whoever placed it had known what they wanted to see, and how long they planned to watch. Asha's breath slowed, not because she was calm, but because her body had shifted into something older than panic. Focus. Survival. The instinct that surfaces when running would only make things worse. Then Graham entered the frame. He was laughing. Not the polite, public laugh he wore to events. This one was loose, unguarded. The laugh of a man at ease, of someone who believed himself unobserved. He loosened his cufflinks, dropped them onto the dresser she'd picked out, and turned to Sienna. For half a second, Asha felt nothing at all. Her mind rejected the image the way the body rejects poison. This wasn't shock. Shock was loud. This was silence, absolute and deafening, as her brain tried to reorganize reality around an impossible fact. Sienna stepped into view barefoot, wearing a shirt Asha recognized instantly. One of Graham's. One she'd folded herself just days earlier. They kissed. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't clumsy. It was practiced, familiar, the kind of intimacy that comes from repetition, not impulse. Asha's fingers curled against the edge of the desk, nails biting into glass. Still, the video did not become what she feared most. It didn't linger on bodies. It didn't chase voyeurism. Whoever had edited this had made a choice, one that felt deliberate, almost merciful. The sex was there, briefly, enough to remove doubt, enough to make denial impossible. Then, the focus shifted. The camera caught their voices more than their bodies. The bed creaking beneath them, the sound of breath settling into conversation. Graham reached for the water on the nightstand, her nightstand, and took a sip. 5 months, he said casually. That's all we have to hold it together. Sienna laughed softly. You're sure? Completely. His voice was calm, confident. The papers are ready. She won't see it coming. Asha's chest tightened, not with heartbreak, but with a sudden, razor-edged clarity. This wasn't about desire. This was about planning. She trusts you, Sienna said. There was something sharp in her tone now, something almost amused. God, she actually thanked me today for being such a good friend. Graham chuckled. She's predictable. She believes loyalty is real. Asha felt the words land like a diagnosis. Predictable. Believes. She won't fight it, he continued. She's too focused on her firm, her image. And if she does, a pause. We control the narrative. Sienna shifted closer to him. You're sure the accounts are locked? Already done, gradually. She signed everything I put in front of her. Another laugh, colder this time. She didn't even read most of it. Asha tasted metal. This was the moment she understood what had truly been taken from her. Not just fidelity, not just friendship, but agency. The quiet theft of choice. The slow erosion of consent disguised as love. On the screen, Graham traced a finger along Sienna's shoulder. Thoughtful now. Once the divorce is final, the assets stay with me. The firm too, at least temporarily, long enough to restructure. And her? Sienna asked. She'll be fine, he said easily. She always is. Besides, people will believe what we tell them. There it was. The lie that held everything together. The belief that Aisha Monroe, the woman who built careers from chaos, would shrink under the weight of personal betrayal. That she would stay silent out of dignity. That shame would keep her manageable. Sienna laughed again, lighter this time. I almost feel bad. Don't, Graham said. She's strong. She doesn't need us. The video ended shortly after that. Not with drama, not with discovery, just the two of them lying in her bed, planning a future built on the careful dismantling of her present. The screen went black. Asha didn't scream. She didn't cry. She sat perfectly still, staring at her reflection in the darkened glass of the laptop, watching a woman she recognized and didn't stare back. Her heartbeat was steady. Too steady. Her body had made a decision her mind hadn't yet articulated. This wasn't a sex tape. It was an audit of trust, of power, of how thoroughly she had been studied and underestimated. Somewhere deep inside her, beneath the ache and the rage and the grief still waiting their turn, a quieter voice surfaced. Clear, unemotional, dangerous. They thought they were wrong. Asha did not go home. The thought of walking back into the penthouse, into the air that still carried his cologne, into the hallway where her heels had echoed beside his for years, made something inside her tighten like a fist. She understood, with a sudden cold certainty, that if she returned too soon, she might do the one thing she could never afford to do now. React. So she moved the way she always moved in a crisis. Quickly, quietly, without announcing herself to the enemy. She left her office after dark with a flash drive in her pocket and her face arranged into calm. In the elevator mirror, she looked exactly like the woman Chicago trusted. Chin lifted, eyes steady, composed enough to make people believe she had never been shaken in her life. She let that version of herself walk out into the rain. Asha checked into a hotel under a name she hadn't used in years, her mother's maiden name. The front desk clerk smiled, unaware he was watching someone cross a line she could not uncross. Her room was high enough to feel distant from the street, but not high enough to feel safe. She dropped her bag on the bed, kicked off her heels, and stood still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. Then she began. The war room wasn't romantic. It was fluorescent light and sharp edges. It was room service she couldn't taste. It was her laptop open on the desk, her phone turned face down like a weapon that might explode if she stared at it too long. She printed nothing. She trusted paper less than she trusted people. Instead, she pulled up every digital file she could access with her own credentials: marriage documents, tax statements, deeds, banking portals. She created a spreadsheet with the same ruthless clarity she'd used to map scandals for clients: dates, names, accounts, signatures, authorizations. Asha knew how lies were structured. She was about to find out how hers had been funded. She started with the prenup. At the time, she'd told herself it was normal, a Caldwell requirement. Old families loved contracts the way they loved art in private schools, as proof of permanence. Graham had framed it as protection for both of us, and she'd signed it in a clean conference room with a notary who smiled too warmly, a woman who congratulated her as if she'd just been adopted into something rare. Now, as Asha read the clauses line by line, her stomach hollowed. There it was, language so polished it sounded harmless. Provisions that would limit disputes, conditions that would preserve family assets, a structure designed to make resistance look irrational. She scrolled down, slower, heart beating harder with each sentence. Separation triggers, asset classification, discretionary trusts, temporary control measures. And then, like a knife hidden in velvet, she found the clause that turned her blood cold. In the event of marital instability, either party could petition for temporary financial guardianship to prevent reckless behavior from jeopardizing shared interests. Marital instability, a phrase so vague it could mean anything: stress, grief, anger, a woman raising her voice. Asha imagined it. Graham's lawyers painting her as volatile, overwhelmed, unwell. A court granting him control for her protection. Accounts frozen, business operations interrupted. Her firm, her life's work, suddenly dependent on permission. She stared at the screen until the words blurred. The betrayal wasn't just sexual. It wasn't even primarily emotional. It was procedural. It was built into the paperwork she'd signed with trust in her chest and love in her mouth. Asha opened the property records next. The penthouse, titled under a Caldwell holding company. The lake house, a trust with his name as primary beneficiary. The investment accounts, dual ownership in theory, but withdrawals requiring his authorization. She kept digging because hope was not a strategy. Then she found the document that made her hands go numb. An amendment to her own business agreement. Monroe and Mercury, her firm, listed Graham as an emergency co-signing authority for operational continuity, dated 2 years earlier. She remembered the conversation now, dimly. Graham had been charming, persuasive. It'll help with lender confidence. It's just paperwork. You'll never even notice. She noticed now. Asha leaned back and closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe through the heat rising behind them. Not tears, something worse. A pressure that threatened to erupt. Her phone lit up again. A message from Graham. Miss you. Are you staying late? I can pick up dinner. She read it once. Twice. The casualness of the lie was almost obscene. Across the city, her husband was texting her like a man who still owned the story, as if her absence was a minor inconvenience, not the beginning of the end. Asha turned the phone off. Then she did the most dangerous thing she'd done all day. She let herself feel. Not all of it. Not the grief yet. That would come later, heavy and slow. But the first clean edge of rage, bright as a blade. She stood in the bathroom and ran the shower cold. The water hit her skin like punishment, like clarity, and she stayed there until her lungs stuttered and her body trembled, until the numbness broke and something alive surged up inside her. In the fogged mirror afterward, her face looked unfamiliar. Eyes red, jaw set, lips pressed together like they were holding back a scream. Asha placed both palms on the sink and stared at herself. "You don't get to be ashamed," she whispered, voice shaking with something steadier underneath. "Not for trusting, not for loving, not for building." The words didn't make her feel better. They made her feel dangerous. Back at the desk, she opened a new folder on her laptop. Evidence. Then another timeline. Then another exit plan. She began to write down everything she remembered from the last year. Every late meeting, every sudden trip, every moment Graham had steered her toward a signature. Every time Sienna had held her too tightly, praised her too loudly, looked away too quickly. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m., then 2. Outside the hotel window, Chicago glittered like nothing was wrong. Like betrayal wasn't happening in penthouses and museums and boardrooms, dressed in silk and good manners. Asha kept working, because by dawn she understood one thing with absolute precision. This war would not be won by heartbreak. It would be won by receipts. By the time morning arrived, Asha had stopped feeling tired. Exhaustion belonged to people who still believed they were safe. She left the hotel just after sunrise, hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding the evidence of a night spent dismantling her own life. Chicago moved around her with indifferent momentum. Commuters clutching coffee, joggers tracing the lakefront, glass buildings catching the early light like nothing underneath them was rotting. The law firm sat on a quiet street far from the river and far from spectacle. No marble columns, no ostentatious signage, just a discreet brass plate beside the door. Reyes, Forensic and Family Law. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and something sharper, intent. Dahlia Reyes did not look like the kind of woman people underestimated twice. She was in her early 60s, silver hair cut close to her jaw, posture precise as punctuation. Her suit was dark, severe, unadorned, the kind of elegance that came from never needing to impress anyone. She did not offer condolences. She did not soften her expression. She simply gestured to the chair across from her desk and said, "Start at the beginning, not the emotional one, the factual one." Asha sat. For the first time since opening the video, she spoke the truth out loud. She described the affair without embellishment. The flash drive, the conversation about assets, the phrase marital instability, the hidden clauses, the business amendment she'd never truly seen. Dahlia listened without interruption, eyes sharp, fingers still. When Asha finished, the silence stretched, not heavy, but deliberate. Then Dahlia stood. She crossed the room and locked the door. "That," she said calmly, returning to her chair, "is not just betrayal. That is preparation." Asha felt something in her chest loosen. Not relief, recognition. Dahlia slid a yellow legal pad toward her. "I want dates. I want names. I want every account number you have, even the ones you think are irrelevant. Especially those." As Asha spoke, Dahlia wrote. Not frantically, not emotionally. Each note looked like a chess move. "You married into a family that understands optics," Dahlia said at last, "which means they will try to make this about tone instead of facts, about your anger instead of his actions." Asha's mouth tightened. "They'll say I'm vindictive. They'll say worse," Dahlia replied evenly. "They'll suggest instability, stress, emotional overinvestment in your work. They'll hint that you're difficult, aggressive, unpredictable." Asha recognized the words immediately. She'd watched them used against other women, against black women most efficiently of all. Dahlia met her gaze. "That's why you're here before you confront anyone." She pulled the flash drive from Asha's evidence folder and inserted it into her computer. She didn't flinch at the footage, didn't react to the intimacy. She fast-forwarded straight to the conversations. When she stopped the video, she smiled, thin, precise. "He's careless," she said. "That's good for us." "For us," Asha repeated quietly. Dahlia turned her screen so Asha could see a highlighted paragraph in the prenup. "Infidelity voids asset protection under Illinois law when combined with misrepresentation or fraud. And your husband," she tapped the screen, has done both. Asha leaned forward, pulse quickening. So the prenup is vulnerable, Dahlia said. Not automatically dead, but bleeding. She opened another document. And this clause about temporary financial guardianship, it cuts both ways. If we establish that he engineered instability for leverage, it becomes evidence of coercion. Asha exhaled slowly. Dahlia continued, "What concerns me more, and helps you more, is this." She brought up a spreadsheet Asha hadn't seen before. "Your husband has been moving marital funds into shell entities without disclosure. That's not clever, that's criminal." The word landed like a door slamming shut. Criminal. Dahlia folded her hands. "If we pursue this aggressively, it will not be quiet. The Caldwell family will fight. They will leak. They will posture. They will try to settle only when they realize they're cornered." "And if I don't want to wait?" Asha asked. "If I don't want months of whispers and smear campaigns?" Dahlia studied her for a long moment. "Then you control the timing. You control the narrative before they can." Asha thought of the gala. The room full of people who believed they knew her marriage, who believed they knew her. "I can do that," she said. Dahlia nodded once. "Good. Then here's what happens next." She outlined the plan without drama. Evidence preservation, digital backups, a forensic accountant, quiet subpoenas, no confrontation, no warnings. "And one more thing," Dahlia added, her voice sharpening. "Do not underestimate your friend." Asha stiffened. Women who participate in these schemes often convince themselves they're not doing real harm, Dahlia continued. When the illusion breaks, they either collapse or they attack. Asha looked down at her hands. They were steady now. "Let her collapse," she said. "I won't." Dahlia's lips curved, just barely. "Good, then we're aligned." When Asha stood to leave, something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer a woman reacting to betrayal. She was a client with leverage. As she stepped back onto the street, the city felt different. Not kinder, not softer, but legible again. For the first time since the anonymous delivery, Asha knew exactly what she was facing. And more importantly, she knew she wasn't facing it alone. Asha returned to the penthouse at exactly 6:42 a.m. because Graham never came home before 7. She knew this not because he told her, but because patterns always confessed eventually. Bank transfers, late-night emails, lovers who believed they were careful, men who thought predictability was privacy. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked composed, but something sharper lived behind her eyes now. Alert, measuring, unafraid. She was no longer stepping into her home. She was entering a site inspection. The door unlocked with the same soft click it always had. Nothing inside had changed. The scent of expensive coffee beans, the art aligned just so, the quiet hum of a life pretending to be intact. Asha set her bag down without a sound. She moved through the apartment with deliberate economy, touching nothing she didn't have to. She bypassed the bedroom. That space was contaminated now, heavy with echoes she refused to indulge. Graham's study was first. The door was locked. Of course it was. Asha crouched, reached beneath the console table, and removed the spare key he'd hidden months ago, convinced he was clever. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, closing it behind her with a finality that felt ceremonial. The room was immaculate, minimal, masculine in the way men believed minimalism signaled discipline. A single framed diploma, a leather chair, a desktop computer positioned at an angle meant to discourage casual curiosity. Asha powered it on. The password took 3 tries, not because she didn't know it, but because she wanted to confirm something. Legacy 38. She swallowed. Not their anniversary, not her birthday, his age, his name, himself. The desktop bloomed to life, folders neatly arranged. No chaos, no obvious panic. Graham was not a man who left messes. That didn't mean he left no traces. Asha inserted her own encrypted drive and began copying everything she could access. Emails, spreadsheets, PDFs, contracts. She photographed the screen with her phone, capturing metadata and timestamps like a forensic technician documenting a crime scene. Then she found the folder that made her hands still. Planning. Inside were subfolders. Accounts, divorce, drafts, media strategy, SP. Sienna Park. Asha opened the emails first. They went back further than the video suggested. Not 6 months, 18. 18 months of coordination, of strategy disguised as intimacy, of messages that read less like lovers and more like co-conspirators. We have to be patient. She won't suspect anything if we keep the tone right. Once the firm's under temporary control, it's just logistics. Logistics. Asha felt something hot and focus cut through her chest. This wasn't an affair that got out of hand. This was a campaign. She moved quickly now, adrenaline sharpening her movements. She copied bank records, wire transfers routed through Shell LLCs in Delaware and Nevada. Small amounts at first, then larger, always spaced just far enough apart to avoid scrutiny. She opened the divorce drafts next. They were clinical, polite, crafted to sound mutual. Irreconcilable differences, emotional distance. Asha's increasing unavailability due to professional commitments. There it was, the story they planned to tell about her. The documents painted her as distracted, ambitious to a fault, incapable of sustaining intimacy. Not abusive, not cruel, just absent. The kind of woman society was comfortable disliking without guilt. Asha saved everything. Then she opened media strategy. Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from the precision of it. Talking points, potential allies, crisis containment scenarios. Her own language mirrored back at her, weaponized. Phrases she'd taught clients to use in emergencies, now stripped of empathy and aimed at her throat. Finally, she opened the last folder. SP. Inside were messages that made the room feel smaller. Sienna mocking her clothes, her brand voice, the way she talked about ethics as if they mattered. Sienna laughing about how easy it was to reassure her. Sienna asking again and again if Graham was sure Asha would stay quiet. Asha closed the folder and leaned back, pressing her fingers to her temples. For one dangerous second, grief threatened to rise. The memories, the loyalty, the shared history, she shut it down. Grief could wait. Evidence could not. She copied everything onto 2 additional drives, then a third. Redundancy was survival. As she removed the last drive, her phone buzzed. A text from Graham. Running to the gym early. You asleep? Asha looked at the screen, then at the room around her. His room. His secrets laid bare in neat digital rows. She typed nothing. Instead, she slipped the drives into her bag, locked the study, and returned the key to its hiding place. In the hallway, she paused, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no doors, no witnesses. She left the apartment exactly as she'd entered it. Quiet, invisible, victorious in a way that hadn't yet announced itself. In the elevator, as the doors slid shut, Asha finally allowed herself a thin, humorless smile. They hadn't just underestimated her, they documented it. And receipts, she knew better than anyone, were the only thing that ever told the truth when everything else tried to lie. Sienna Park had always believed she was the kind of person who wouldn't do this. She told herself that often, like a prayer, like a spell, because the alternative was admitting she had become exactly what she despised. The kind of woman who smiled into another woman's face while holding the knife behind her back. But belief was not the same as truth. On the morning after the lunch with Asha, Sienna woke up with her heart already racing, as if her body had been running all night while her mind pretended to sleep. Her apartment smelled faintly of expensive candles and museum dust. The sheets were twisted around her legs. She stared at the ceiling, trying to find a version of herself that still made sense. Her phone sat on the nightstand, face down. She didn't pick it up immediately. She knew if she did, she'd see her own messages. Too tender, too late, and she couldn't bear the sound of her hypocrisy. Sienna wasn't born into the world Asha and Graham now occupied. She clawed her way into it with taste, intelligence, and the particular kind of charm that made wealthy donors feel interesting. In the museum world, there was always money, private collections, philanthropic dinners, patron boards filled with people who treated art like currency and artists like accessories. And Sienna? Sienna had learned to be useful. Her whole life had been a careful performance of belonging. The right laugh, the right pause, the right dress, the right vocabulary, the right silence. Asha never seemed to need any of that. Asha walked into rooms like she had built them. That was what Sienna loved most about her, and what quietly made Sienna ache with envy when she was alone. Because Asha didn't just survive the system, she bent it. And Sienna, no matter how far she climbed, still felt the invisible hands of it around her throat, guiding her, reminding her that she was always one mistake away from being removed. When Graham first noticed her, she told herself it was harmless. He was Aisha's husband. Their dinners were group dinners. Their conversations were all above board. He asked her about exhibitions, about the politics of donors, about what the museum needed. He listened, really listened, in a way men like him rarely did. Then one night, after a fundraiser, he walked her to her car while Asha stayed behind speaking with a board member. The lake wind had been sharp, the streetlights turning everything silver and surreal. "You're not like the people here," Graham had said softly. It should have sounded like a compliment. It should have sounded like danger. Sienna had laughed. "Neither is Asha." Graham's smile had been slow. "Asha is extraordinary, but she doesn't always see what she does to people." "What she does?" Sienna asked, uneasy. He shrugged lightly, like it didn't matter. "She makes you feel small without even trying." Sienna should have defended her. She should have shut it down. Instead, something in her chest flinched, because the sentence didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like recognition. That was the first crack. After that, Graham became a private conversation. A quick text, a lingering look across a room, a shared joke about donors who pretended they didn't need attention while starving for it. Then the night it crossed the line, Sienna told herself it was an accident. Too much wine, too much emotion, too much loneliness. Graham kissed her in a hallway that smelled like old money, and Sienna's body responded before her conscience could catch up. He made her feel wanted in a way that wasn't careful, in a way that didn't require her to be brilliant or composed or useful. He made her feel chosen. And once a woman has spent her whole life fighting to be chosen, the wrong kind of attention can feel like salvation. Still, guilt arrived quickly. It lived in her throat when Asha laughed. It clenched her stomach when Asha hugged her. It made her overcompensate, compliments, gifts, exaggerated loyalty. When she told Asha about Los Angeles, it had been half truth and half escape fantasy. A way to leave without being caught, to disappear before the story exploded. But Graham hadn't wanted her to disappear. He wanted her to wait. 5 months, he'd said, always 5 months, like the future could be scheduled and packaged neatly. Then we can stop hiding. Sienna had nodded like she believed him. Sometimes she did. Other times, like now, she felt the weight of what she'd done pressed down so hard she could barely breathe. Her phone finally buzzed. She flipped it over and saw Graham's name. "We're good. Stay calm. Don't act weird around her." Act weird. Sienna let out a thin, shaking laugh that sounded close to a sob. As if acting was the problem. As if the betrayal itself wasn't already a living thing, growing larger by the day. She typed back, "She trusts me." A beat. Then Graham replied, "That's why this works." Sienna's hands began to tremble. She set the phone down and stood too quickly, dizziness washing over her. She walked to the bathroom mirror and stared at her reflection, searching for the girl she used to be, the one who believed she had principles. Her eyes looked too bright, her skin too pale. "I'm not a monster," she whispered, but her reflection didn't answer. All day, the panic followed her. In the museum, she drifted through galleries like a ghost, smiling at patrons, discussing provenance, pretending her mind wasn't replaying Asha's face at that restaurant. Asha had looked at her with such steady affection. That was what made Sienna feel sick. Not Graham, not the sex, not even the lying, Asha's love. Because love that pure made betrayal feel like sacrilege. By evening, Sienna couldn't eat. She couldn't sit still. She sent Asha another message. Something small, something safe, something that sounded like friendship. Miss you already. Proud of you. Always. Then she stared at it, disgusted by herself, and threw her phone onto the couch like it had burned her. Her chest felt tight, breath shallow. She imagined Aisha finding out. The flash of rage. The silence, the humiliation. Sienna pressed her palms to her eyes and tried to picture herself walking into Asha's life afterward, trying to explain. There was no explanation that wouldn't sound like a confession of weakness, because the truth was ugly and simple. Sienna had wanted what Aisha had, not just the penthouse, not just the access, the unshakable certainty, and instead of building her own, she had tried to steal it. That night, lying in the dark, Sienna realized the most terrifying part of the story was not what she had done. It was what she knew, deep down, about Asha. Asha Monroe did not break publicly. She broke privately, rebuilt quietly, and returned sharper than before. And if Asha ever turned that kind of focus on her, Sienna would not survive it the way she'd survived everything else. Not with her name intact, not with her story under her control, not at all. The Caldwell Gala was not a party, it was a demonstration. Every year, the same families gathered as if they were attending a ritual older than the city itself. Donors with quiet money, attorneys with quiet power, judges whose smiles never reached their eyes, politicians who measured every handshake like it could be used later. The gala was where Chicago's elite reminded one another who still belonged at the center of the room, and the Caldwells always stood there, perfectly positioned, as if the room had been built around them. This year, the gala would be held at the Lakefront Estate in Evanston, in a glass-walled hall overlooking the dark stretch of Lake Michigan. The invitation had arrived weeks ago on thick cream paper with embossed lettering that felt like a warning. You are being watched. You are being assessed. Asha had placed it on the kitchen counter and pretended it was just another event. Another night of smiles and small talk. Another evening where she would wear the right dress and speak with the right restraint, while Graham's family accepted her like a possession they'd agreed to tolerate. Now, the invitation sat in her hotel room, next to 3 encrypted drives and a legal pad filled with timelines, account numbers, and names. It looked different up close, less like a celebration, more like a stage. Asha didn't decide to go to the gala out of impulse. She decided the way she made every high-stakes move. After evaluating the terrain, court would be slow. Court would be quiet at first, then ugly. Court would give the Caldwells time to build a counter-narrative, time to leak selective information, time to paint Aisha as unstable, and Graham as the patient husband trying to protect family assets. Asha understood something most people learn too late. In a world run by reputation, the first story told is the one that sticks. So if she was going to win, she had to take the microphone before they could take her voice. The gala was perfect because it was exclusive enough to feel private and powerful enough to feel permanent. 60, maybe 80 people, small by public standards, enormous by influence. The kind of audience that could kill a career in a whisper, or resurrect one with the same quiet efficiency. Asha wasn't just exposing betrayal, she was exposing the machinery that protected it. 2 nights before the event, she sat across from Dahlia Reyes again. The attorney's office looked the same, controlled, unsentimental, built for war. Dahlia read through the new evidence Asha had recovered, her expression tightening with satisfaction. He's dirtier than I expected, Dahlia said. Offshore transfers, commingling funds, using your firm as a financial instrument. And this, she tapped a printed email chain, he's planning to frame you. Asha didn't blink. I know, Dahlia studied her. The moment you confront him, he will pivot. Tears, apologies, confusion, or rage. But the real danger isn't his emotions. It's his timing. What do you mean? I mean, Dahlia said evenly, if he suspects you have evidence, he will move faster. Freeze accounts. File first. Call allies. The Caldwells will close ranks like a trap. Asha nodded once. Then I won't confront him. Dahlia's eyes sharpened. What are you planning? Asha didn't answer immediately. She pictured the gala hall, the donors sipping champagne, the family's crest projected behind the stage, Graham's mother giving her annual speech about legacy and virtue. She pictured Sienna's smile in a red dress, floating through the crowd like innocence. Then she pictured the moment the room realized it had been worshipping a lie. A presentation, Asha said softly. Dahlia didn't ask what kind. She simply leaned back. If you do this publicly, you need to be precise. No explicit content, no ambiguity, no slander that can be spun as emotional retaliation. Asha's mouth tightened. I don't need porn. I need proof. Good, Dahlia said. Then here's what we do. You keep copies. You maintain chain of custody. You edit for clarity. You focus on conversation and intent, financial theft, coercion, narrative manipulation. Asha nodded again. And you prepare for their counterattack. Dahlia's smile was thin. Always. After she left the law office, Asha went to her own. Monroe and Mercury's headquarters was quiet after hours. Lights dimmed, the city reflected in the glass. She walked through the space she'd built from nothing. Conference rooms where clients had begged her to save them. Hallways where interns whispered about her like she was myth. She stopped in front of the storage closet where event equipment was kept for client launches and press conferences. Cases of microphones, portable screens, high-grade projectors used for brand reveals, tools for storytelling, tools for control. Asha stood there for a long time, hands in her pockets, as if she were choosing a weapon. Then she called Nia. I need you to schedule an AV delivery, Asha said, voice calm. Professional grade, screen, projector, speakers. It has to be seamless. Nia hesitated. For the gala? Yes. What kind of presentation? Asha paused, making her tone effortless. A tribute. There was another silence, careful this time. To the Caldwells? To legacy, Asha said, and loyalty. The things people like that claim to value. Nia didn't push. She'd worked for Asha long enough to recognize the sound of a decision that couldn't be undone. When Asha hung up, her phone lit again. Graham, can you help me pick a tie for the gala? Mom wants us to look unified. Unified. Asha stared at the word until it felt like an insult. She typed back one sentence, light and sweet and perfectly believable. Of course, anything for family. Then she set the phone down, lifted her eyes to the city outside her window, and let the truth settle fully into her bones. The event everyone would attend wasn't the gala. The event was what she was bringing into it. And by the time the Caldwells realized what she'd done, it would be too late to edit the story. Because Asha Monroe wasn't walking into that room to be evaluated. She was walking in to end something. Publicly, precisely, in the only language the powerful truly respected. Exposure. Graham came home carrying flowers. They were white lilies, expensive, dramatic, the kind of arrangement meant to signal effort. Asha noticed immediately that they were her favorite, which meant one of two things. Either he had finally learned something after years of marriage, or someone had reminded him to try. She knew which one it was. Hey, he said easily, leaning in to kiss her cheek. His voice was warm, practiced. I thought we could have dinner together tonight. No phones, just us. Asha accepted the flowers and smiled. She had worn that smile to boardrooms full of men who believed they could intimidate her. She knew exactly how convincing it looked. That sounds nice, she said. They ate at the long dining table, overlooking the city, the skyline glittering beyond the glass like an accomplice. Graham talked about work, safe details, vague frustrations, harmless anecdotes meant to convey normalcy. He laughed at the right moments, asked about her day with the right amount of interest. If someone had been watching them, they would have seen a successful couple reconnecting, a marriage recalibrating, a man trying. Asha watched him closely, the way she watched clients when they lied. His hands were steady, his breathing even. No tells. Graham Caldwell did not crack under pressure. He simply adapted. "You've seemed distant lately," he said at last, swirling his wine. "I just want to make sure we're okay." There it was. The opening move. Asha tilted her head slightly, considering. "What does okay look like to you?" He smiled. "You know, aligned, on the same page. You've been so focused on work. I worry sometimes that you forget you don't have to carry everything alone." Concern, care, a gentle repositioning of responsibility. Asha reached for her glass and took a slow sip. "Do you feel like I don't trust you?" Graham blinked, just once. "Of course not." She set the glass down carefully. "Do you trust me?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause, barely perceptible, was everything. "I married you," he said finally. "Of course I trust you." Not yes, not completely. A statement that sounded like an answer without being one. Asha leaned back in her chair. The city lights framed him perfectly. A portrait of a man who believed himself in control of the frame. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Graham nodded. "Anything. Do you love me?" The question landed between them, simple and unadorned. No accusation, no raised voice, just words. Graham's expression shifted. Not panic, not guilt. Calculation. "Why would you ask that?" he said gently. "I just want to hear you say it," Asha replied. "Tonight." He reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it in a way that would have once reassured her. "I love you, Asha," he said. "You're my wife, my partner. We built something real together." The words were perfect. That was how she knew they were false. Because real love, Asha realized, didn't need to be recited like a mission statement. She smiled again. "Good," she said. "I'm glad." Graham relaxed slightly, mistaking her acceptance for victory. He stood, clearing plates, moving around the kitchen like a man inhabiting his rightful space. "My mother's excited for the gala," he said casually. "She wants you seated next to her. She says you've been so impressive this year." Asha almost laughed. "How generous," she said. He turned to look at her. "It means something, you know." Her approval. Asha met his eyes. "Does it?" For a fraction of a second, something dark flickered there. Annoyance, maybe. Or the irritation of a man reminded that admiration was no longer currency. "It should," he said evenly. "Family matters." "Yes," Asha agreed. "It does." They moved to the living room after dinner. Graham poured them both another drink. He sat closer to her on the couch than he had in months, arm resting along the back cushion, a claim disguised as affection. "You'll wear something elegant tomorrow," he said. "Something timeless. It's important we present well." Asha thought of the dress hanging in her hotel closet. Not the one he expected. "I always do," she replied. He smiled, satisfied, and leaned in to kiss her. His lips brushed her temple, her hair. Familiar, intimate, empty. That night, they lay in bed together. Graham fell asleep quickly, breath deep and even, confident in the version of reality he believed he controlled. Aisha lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of a man who had already written her out of his future. She thought of the flash drive, the documents, the gala hall filling with people who thought they knew this marriage. She thought of how carefully Graham had played his role tonight, how effortlessly he'd worn love like camouflage. In the dark, Asha turned her head and looked at him one last time, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with clarity. The man beside her was not her husband anymore. He was her opponent. And tomorrow night, at a table surrounded by power and polished lies, she would let him believe, just a little longer, that dinner had been the most dangerous part of this story. She closed her eyes and waited for morning, because the enemy always slept best the night before they lost everything. Asha dressed the way a woman dresses when she's about to bury a version of herself. The gown was white, clean, architectural, sleeved and structured with a neckline sharp enough to feel like a warning. Not bridal, not soft, not hopeful. White the way marble is white. White the way winter is white. White the way an ending can look pristine when it's finally inevitable. In the mirror, She studied her own face with the same calm precision she used on brand campaigns. No trembling mouth, no watery eyes, just a quiet stillness that didn't ask permission. She pinned her hair back, simple, severe. She wanted nothing about her to look accidental tonight. Then she checked her bag one last time. A small remote, a flash drive, two backups, a folded list of names and seat positions, donors, lawyers, the people who mattered. Her phone on silent, Dahlia Reyes's number pinned to the top of her contacts like a shield. The car ride to Evanston took 28 minutes. The driver didn't speak. The city blurred into quiet neighborhoods, and then into the kind of streets where wealth hid behind trees and gates. The Caldwell estate rose at the end of a long driveway, glass walls glowing with warm light, everything designed to look transparent while keeping every true thing protected. Beyond it, Lake Michigan was black and restless, reflecting nothing. Asha stepped out of the car and felt the air hit her skin, cool, damp, charged. For a moment she stood still, letting the evening settle around her like a cloak. Then she walked inside. The hall was already filling. Soft music, low laughter, the clink of crystal. Men in tailored suits moving like they owned not only the room, but the future. Women in silk and diamonds smiling with practiced restraint. Asha recognized faces from charity boards, from political fundraisers, from quiet scandals she'd helped bury. People who called her brilliant in private and impressive in public, as if even her excellence needed to be handled delicately. Heads turned as she entered. Not just she was beautiful, Asha was used to that, but because she carried herself like someone who belonged without needing approval. That kind of presence unsettled people who depended on hierarchy. Graham found her within minutes. He looked perfect in black tie, hair neatly styled, jaw set with the confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone he couldn't replace. He kissed her cheek and let his hand rest at her waist, a public claim. "You look stunning," he murmured. "Exactly what I hoped." Asha smiled, smooth as glass. "I'm glad." He didn't hear the quiet irony in her tone. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. His mother approached next. Margot Caldwell wore navy silk and a diamond necklace that sat on her collarbone like a crown. Her smile was polished, her eyes sharp. She embraced Asha with the careful distance of someone touching a valuable object she didn't fully trust. "Asha," she said, voice sweet, "how lovely. White is bold." "It felt appropriate," Asha replied. Margot's gaze swept over her dress, her posture, her face. Assessment. Approval measured in ounces. "You must sit with me tonight," Margot continued. "We have so many guests who adore hearing about your work. It's always interesting to see how you handle difficult situations." Asha held the smile, kept her voice light. "It's what I do." Margot leaned closer, lowering her voice to something that could pass as intimacy. "And it's what you should keep doing, handling things with grace. A woman's composure is her greatest asset." There it was again, composure as commandment, silence as virtue. Asha met her eyes and let something colder pass behind her own. "I couldn't agree more." Margot drifted away, satisfied, her heels clicking like punctuation on marble. Asha moved through the room after that, doing what she had always done. Reading people, matching energy, giving them just enough of what they wanted to feel comfortable. A compliment to the donor's wife, a laugh at the judge's joke, a subtle refusal to drink too much, a gentle deflection when someone asked about her future plans. The role of perfect wife was easy. She had been trained for it since the day she married a Caldwell. Across the room, she saw Sienna. Sienna wore a deep red gown, hair swept up, lipstick carefully applied. She looked radiant in the way desperate people often do, overlit, overpolished, as if beauty could distract from fear. Their eyes met. Sienna's smile faltered for half a second before she forced it back into place. She began walking toward Asha, weaving through guests with that familiar, practiced charm. Asha's pulse remained steady. She watched Sienna approach as if she were watching weather. something inevitable moving closer. Look at you, Sienna breathed, stopping in front of her. Asha, you're unreal. Thank you, Asha said softly. Sienna laughed too high. White, you're going to outshine everyone. Graham must be losing his mind. Asha tilted her head, studying her friend's face. The tightness around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands when she lifted her glass. You seem nervous, Asha said. Sienna blinked. What? No, I'm fine. Just crowds, you know me. Asha nodded slowly, as if she believed her. Sienna leaned closer, lowering her voice. I'm glad you came tonight. I was worried you might skip. Asha's gaze didn't move. Why would I skip? Sienna swallowed. I've missed you. You've been so busy. Busy. The words sat between them like a lie dressed up as concern. Asha placed her hand lightly on Sienna's arm, gentle enough to look affectionate, firm enough to be unmistakable. You once asked me to promise we'd never lie to each other, Asha said quietly. Sienna's eyes widened, confusion flashing first, then fear. Asha smiled, bright and empty. I've been thinking about that. Sienna opened her mouth, but no words came. Across the room, Graham's voice rose in laughter with a group of donors. His posture was relaxed, his face open. A man comfortable in his mask. Asha released Sienna's arm and stepped back. Enjoy the evening, she said. Sienna nodded too grifted away, shaken, as if she'd felt a draft of something colder than the lake wind outside. The lights in the hall dimmed slightly as staff moved with quiet coordination. A stage at the front of the room waited beneath a large screen, installed seamlessly as if it had always been part of the design. The Caldwells loved spectacle when they controlled it. Asha glanced at the screen and felt the remote in her bag like a heartbeat. A bell chimed softly. Conversations lowered. People turned their bodies toward the front with the obedient ease of those used to being led. Margot Caldwell stepped to the microphone first, smiling like a woman about to bless the room. Welcome, she began, voice warm. Tonight we celebrate legacy, loyalty, and the values that have guided our family for generations. Asha stood beside Graham, his hand lightly resting on her back. She smiled on cue. She looked supportive. She looked calm. She looked like a woman who had no intention of changing the course of the night. Then Margot finished her speech, and Graham leaned toward the microphone, still smiling. And now, he said, voice carrying smoothly through the hall, my wife has prepared something special for all of you. Asha stepped forward. 60, maybe 80 pairs of eyes turned to her with polite curiosity, with condescension disguised as warmth, with the quiet assumption that she would entertain them and then return to her place at Graham's side. Asha walked to the front of the room and watched. She stood beneath the lights, looked out at the audience, and lifted her chin. In her bag, her fingers closed around the remote, and in that single breath before she spoke, the role slipped fully into place. Not the role they expected, the role she chose, the one that would make sure no one in that room ever forgot her name again. Asha stood beneath the stage lights and let the room settle. In front of her, the Caldwell's world shimmered in its usual disguise. Champagne and crystal flutes, diamonds catching the light like tiny promises. Laughter softened into polite murmurs as people waited to be impressed. In the front row, Margot Caldwell sat with her spine straight and her smile prepared. Graham stood just behind Asha's shoulder, close enough to look supportive, close enough to feel like a leash. Asha held the microphone with both hands, steady. Thank you, she began, her voice smooth and clear, the voice of a woman who had ended crises for people who didn't deserve saving. Tonight, we've heard a lot about legacy, about loyalty, about the values that make a family strong. Heads nodded, smiles widened. People relaxed into the comfort of familiar words. Asha continued, I've worked with public figures and private families for years, and I've learned something important. Reputation is what you show the world. Character is what you do when you think no one is watching. A small ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the crowd. Asha could feel it, the room taking her in, accepting her as entertainment. She turned her head slightly and looked at Graham. His eyes met hers with calm confidence, as if he were admiring her performance, as if he believed he still owned the script. Asha smiled back. Then she reached into her clutch and pulled out the small remote. "I prepared a presentation," she said gently, "as a tribute. Something honest, something that reflects the true nature of the Caldwell legacy." Graham's mouth twitched, a flicker of curiosity. No fear yet. Asha pressed the button. The lights dimmed automatically, timed perfectly. The hall hushed. The giant screen behind her flickered to life, first black, then a faint image sharpening into focus. A bedroom, Asha's bedroom. For a moment, people simply stared, confused, trying to place the setting. Then two figures moved into frame. The camera angle was high, hidden, undeniable. Graham, Sienna. It took 5 seconds for recognition to spread like electricity through the room. A soft gasp, then another. A strangled sound from somewhere near the front. A wine glass clinked against the floor and shattered, the sharp noise slicing through the silence. Margot Caldwell went rigid. Her smile froze into something monstrous, halfway between disbelief and rage. Graham's face drained of color so quickly it looked unreal, like the blood had abandoned him in a single rush. His hand lifted as if to reach for Asha, then stopped, suspended in midair, because the room was watching. And Asha had edited the video with surgical care. There was no lingering nudity, no explicit detail to give anyone an excuse to look away in embarrassment. The footage cut cleanly from the unmistakable proof of intimacy to the part that mattered most. The conversation. Graham's voice came through the speakers, crisp and confident, amplified across the glass-walled hall. 5 months, he said on the screen, laughing softly. That's all we have to hold it together. Sienna's voice followed, light and cruel. She won't see it coming. She trusts you. She trusts me. The room didn't breathe. Asha stood in white, facing forward, while her life played behind her like evidence in court. On the screen, Graham continued, casual as if he were discussing stock options. She signed everything I put in front of her. Didn't even read most of it. A murmur swept the hall. Not sympathy, shock, because the Caldwells were used to being admired, not exposed. Sienna laughed. God, she actually thanked me today for being such a good friend. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Oh my God," as if prayer could undo what they were seeing. The video cut again, another segment, carefully chosen. Graham, if she fights, we control the narrative. We'll paint her as unstable, emotional, difficult. The words hit the room differently than the affair. This was not romance. This was strategy. The kind of strategy wealthy families understood perfectly because they'd used it on others. Asha watched faces tighten, donors exchanging quick glances, attorneys suddenly paying attention like wolves sensing blood. A judge's wife pressed a hand to her throat. A board member's smile collapsed into alarm. On the screen, Sienna asked, almost breathless, "And her firm?" Graham answered, warm with satisfaction. "Temporary control, long enough to restructure. It's just logistics." Logistics. Asha's stomach turned, but her face remained still. She let the word hang in the air, heavy and ugly, because she wanted them to feel how small he had made her in his mind. The video ran for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Not long enough for people to recover, not short enough to be denied. When it ended, the screen went black. Silence poured into the room like cold water. Asha didn't move. She let the quiet stretch until it became unbearable, until even the powerful people in the room had to face what they always avoided, discomfort they couldn't purchase their way out of. Then she spoke. "This footage," Asha said, voice steady, "was recorded in my home, in my bed. The woman you saw is Sienna Park, my best friend. The man is my husband, Graham Caldwell." Her words were simple, factual. She didn't need anger to sharpen them. The truth did that on its own. Margot Caldwell stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "Turn that off," she hissed, as if the video were still playing, as if she could command reality back into place. "It's already off," Asha replied calmly, turning her head slightly. But the truth doesn't end just because you're uncomfortable. Graham's lips parted, voice cracking as he finally found it. Asha, this isn't... Don't, Asha said, cutting him off with one word so clean it felt like a slap. He stopped. He had never heard that tone from her before. Not in private, not in public. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hysteria. It was authority. Asha turned back to the room. I want everyone here to understand something, she said. This is not just adultery. This is a coordinated attempt to strip me of my assets, my business, and my autonomy using legal language designed to make theft look like protection. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a slim folder. Copies, selected pages, highlighted clauses. She didn't need to show everything. She needed to show enough. I have bank records, email chains, legal drafts, evidence of fraud. And tomorrow morning, my attorney will be filing the appropriate actions. Asha paused, letting her gaze travel across the audience, from donors to lawyers to people who had smiled at her all night without ever truly seeing her. And for those of you wondering why I chose to share this here, she added softly, it's because this room is where reputations are made, where stories are decided, and I refuse to let mine be written by people who think my silence is part of the arrangement. Graham stepped closer, desperation flashing now, sweat beginning to shine at his temples. We can talk, please. Asha turned to him, slowly. Her white dress caught the light like a blade. This is me talking, she said, voice low enough to be intimate, loud enough for everyone to hear. You had 18 months to tell the truth. Tonight, you don't get to negotiate it. Behind her, the screen remained dark. In front of her, the room remained frozen. And in the space between those two silences, the silence of the lie that had ended, and the silence of the truth that had just begun, Asha Monroe stood exactly where she belonged, at the center of the story, with everyone watching, unable to look away. Chaos did not erupt immediately. That was the first mistake the Caldwells made. They believed silence could still be managed. For several long seconds after Asha finished speaking, the room remained frozen in a tableau of wealth confronted with truth. No one rushed her. No one shouted. People simply stared. Because people like this had been trained their entire lives to observe before they reacted. Then Margot Caldwell moved. This is a family matter, she said sharply, stepping forward as if authority were something she could summon by tone alone. How dare you? How dare you ambush us in public with edited footage and accusations? Nothing was edited for deception, Asha replied calmly, only for clarity. Graham finally found his voice, but it came out wrong, too loud, too desperate. This is out of context. Asha is emotional. She's been under a lot of stress with her firm, and there it was, the pivot, the narrative they had rehearsed. Difficult, emotional, unstable. Asha didn't flinch. Behind the scenes, something else was already moving. At the back of the hall, Dahlia Reyes stood beside a catering door, phone pressed to her ear, posture relaxed in the way of someone who knew the board had already been flipped. Her presence had been deliberate, quiet, legal insurance with eyes. Margot turned toward the audience, attempting to rally them. I ask everyone here to remember discretion. This family has given discretion, Asha interrupted gently, is what allows abuse to look like tradition. The word abuse landed hard. A judge's wife stiffened. A donor lowered his glass. Several phones were already out, not raised high, but angled low, recording without looking like it. Graham stepped closer to Asha, his voice dropping into something meant to sound intimate. You're making a mistake. We can fix this. You're embarrassing yourself. Asha met his eyes and smiled. Small, precise, devastating. No, she said, I'm embarrassing you. Then she stepped aside. Dahlia Reyes walked forward. The shift in the room was immediate. Lawyers recognized lawyers. Predators recognized sharper predators. I'm Dahlia Reyes, she said, voice calm, carrying easily. Counsel for Ms. Monroe. For those of you concerned about defamation, Rest assured, all claims presented tonight are supported by authenticated evidence, including financial records, communications, and legal drafts. She held up a folder, thinner than anyone expected. Mr. Caldwell has engaged in undisclosed asset transfers, fraudulent commingling of marital funds, and coercive contractual manipulation. Ththese are not allegations. These are facts. A murmur rippled through the crowd, this time not shock, but calculation. Because fraud was not romantic. Fraud didn't get smoothed over with apologies. Fraud triggered audits, investigations, headlines that didn't care about family names. Graham's face collapsed inward, panic finally breaking through the polish. "This is insane," he said hoarsely. "She's trying to destroy me." Asha turned to him fully now. "You destroyed yourself," she said. "I just stopped protecting the lie." Across the room, Sienna had begun to cry. Not quietly, not gracefully. Her shoulders shook as mascara streaked down her cheeks, her glass slipping from her fingers to shatter on the marble floor. Heads turned, whispers sharpened. "She knew," someone murmured. "She helped him," someone else said. Sienna tried to speak, but the sound that came out was raw and broken. I didn't think it would go this far." Asha looked at her once. There was no hatred in her gaze, no triumph, only finality. "This always goes as far as the truth," Asha said. "You just never thought you'd have to face it." Margot Caldwell rounded on Dahlia. "You will not do this to my family. We will bury this." Dahlia smiled thinly. "You're welcome to try, but hiding assets after disclosure carries criminal consequences. And now," she gestured subtly to the room, "now there are witnesses." That was when the room began to fracture. Donors edged away from the Caldwells. Conversations splintered. Phones buzzed with quiet urgency. A board member slipped out the side door. A political aide whispered into a sleeve. Not loudly, irreversibly. Graham's father finally spoke, voice trembling with fury and fear. "End this. Now." Asha shook her head once. "I'm ending it tomorrow. Legally." She turned back to the room. "I'm filing for divorce. The prenuptial agreement is void due to infidelity and fraud. I will be seeking my lawful share of all marital assets, including any funds improperly transferred." Margot gasped, sharp and theatrical. "You won't get a cent." Asha's voice didn't rise. "Your lawyers will advise you otherwise." And that was the moment the Caldwells understood. Not that they had been humiliated, but that they had lost control of the timeline. As security quietly opened doors, as guests began to leave in clusters of whispered analysis, Graham stood frozen, his world collapsing in slow motion. He reached for Asha again, reflexively. She stepped back. "Don't," she said. "You've taken enough without permission." Asha turned and walked away from the stage. Behind her, voices rose. Arguments, accusations, panic breaking through generations of restraint. Sienna sank to the floor, sobbing. Margot shouted orders no one obeyed anymore. But Asha didn't look back. She walked through the hall, past the glass walls, past the lake reflecting nothing, past the exit where her car waited. By morning, the lawyers would move. The headlines would follow. The investigations would begin their slow, merciless work. Tonight had not destroyed the Caldwell. It had done something far worse. It had made them ordinary. And as Asha stepped into the night air, the sound of the door closing behind her felt like the end of a sentence she had never been allowed to finish. Until now, freedom did not arrive with applause. It arrived in fragments. Court filings delivered before sunrise, accounts frozen, then reopened under new authority. Board members who stopped returning Graham Caldwell's calls. Invitations that vanished. Meetings postponed indefinitely. The city didn't turn on him all at once. It simply stepped aside and let gravity do its work. The divorce moved faster than anyone expected. Fraud had a way of accelerating truth. Within months, Asha Monroe stood alone in a new office overlooking the river, sunlight cutting clean lines across concrete and glass. Monroe and Mercury no longer existed. She had dissolved it herself and rebuilt under a new name, Monroe sovereign, with no silent clauses, no borrowed power, no signatures she didn't understand. She was invited to speak about ethics, about financial abuse disguised as partnership, about how silence was often sold as dignity to women who were being slowly erased. People listening, Graham's name, once spoken with deference, now surfaced only in cautionary tones. Investigations followed him like shadows. Deals evaporated. Friends distanced themselves politely, professionally, permanently. Sienna disappeared from the city within weeks, but the past has a way of knocking again. One evening, months later, as Asha prepared to leave her office, the receptionist buzzed her line. "There's a woman here asking for you. She says it's urgent." The woman was younger, nervous, holding a folder like a lifeline. "My name is Lila," she said, voice shaking. I was seeing Graham Caldwell. He told me you were dangerous, vindictive, that you ruined him." Asha felt no surge of anger, only recognition. "He asked me to sign these," Lila continued, opening the folder. "Transfer documents, familiar language, familiar traps. Something felt wrong. I Googled you." Asha took a breath and nodded toward a chair. "You did the right thing." They talked for an hour, about warning signs, about manipulation dressed as romance, about trusting instincts before contracts. When Lila left, steadier than she'd arrived, Asha stood alone by the window, watching the city glow into night. That was when she understood it fully. Freedom wasn't revenge. It wasn't silence. And it wasn't forgiveness. Freedom was refusing to betray yourself ever again, and making sure other women didn't have to learn the hard way alone. Her phone buzzed. A text from someone new. A life unfolding slowly, on her terms. Asha smiled. She turned off the lights and walked out into the night, not toward a man, not toward validation, but toward a future she had built with eyes wide open. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or the strength you're still discovering, support it by liking, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and following for more stories like this. Because freedom isn't quiet, and some truths are meant to be heard.